Prelude to Ulysses. Remember. That's all. Words of wisdom. Last time on. Oh, this is Alex Reed's Norman Miller's Ancient Evenings. This book's pretty fucked up, man. I'm gonna open this curtain. Hi, baby. For sure, this book is pretty nasty in a lot of ways. So, let's continue, I suppose. All right, last time, many two, many one. Mom and Dad went to go meet the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh seems pretty taken with Hathfertidi and the two minis. But the dad, whose job it is to, I don't know, put makeup on the Pharaoh or something. I'm really unsure about that. He is kind of looked down upon, but that's just kind of his cast in life. It's what it seems like. It's who he is. It seems bizarre to everyone that many too, our dead hero is related to the dad or whatever. I don't know, man. But it's gross. He's still blowing his grandpa in that cave. He is. That's for real. Great grandfather. So interwoven in this phenomenal, beautifully written story is some real gross shit. But you know what? You know what we say here on Prelude to Ulysses is the fuck ever, man. Part 4. By the way I was carried, I could feel her fury. My stomach was on her shoulder, and my head below her breast. The ground rose. Nothing. Oh, wait, hold on. I don't remember what happened at the end of the last one. He started like being an empath for the dog. Yeah, he starts to come to realize that he is. So in this moment with the Pharaoh and his mom and dad, he realizes that he is actually dead, blowing his grandpa in the cave, and returns back to the memory or reality of spending time with the Pharaoh and his family, getting masseused by the eunuchs. And then his mom caught him and started shaking him and ran away from the Pharaoh, seemingly out of embarrassment. Turmeric tea. By the way I was carried, I could feel her fury. My stomach was on her shoulder, and my head below her breast. The ground rose towards me and dropped away on every step as if I was swinging upside down. But I was so scalded with fright that I might as well have been a small beast just dropped into boiling water, my life screaming out of me even as my flesh was being cooked. When we came to a stop and she set me down, I thought for a moment I had died. We were standing in a room so beautiful I did not know at first if we were in a house, a garden, or a pond. This thing got pretty bent. If you're just joining us, this is I get pretty distracted sometimes. Trees surrounding me, they were painted on every wall. I stood upon a watery marsh grass floor. A golden marsh grass and painted fish were swimming. And painted fish were swimming between the painted blades of grass. Above, stars were shining out of a painted evening sky, and in the red light of the western wall, the sun was setting, even as it had set last night to the west of my great-grandfather's roof. Only now, the view of only now the view of the pyramids. Only now the view was of the pyramids, and they were red as the meat of the pomegranate in this light. Sitting on the painted plain of Giza, Gizeh, Giza, between two of the four golden trees that held up the corners of the room. Doves and butterflies hovered in the steaming air. Lapwings and green siskins flew in and out of the horns of oxen and the swamp reeds on the wall. Water lilies bloomed beneath my feet, and blue lotus almost concealed the rat who was stealing eggs from a crocodile's nest. In the midst of my weeping, I began to laugh at the expression on the crocodile's face. Now my mother put an arm around my waist and asked me to look at her. But I was staring at the ivory leg of the couch on which she sat. It was not like the limb and hoof of an ox, or would have been if the hoof. It was like the limb and hoof of an ox, or would have been if the hoof did not rest upon the polished floor instead of sinking into it. Although as I continued to stare, the glaze was so high on the painted water that I could see my own reflection and my mother's, which gave, therefore, the look of light on water after all. We stood among all the birds and animals who lived in the paint, and I could see flies and scorpions. I could even see flies and scorpions placed by the artist on the roots of the grass through which the fish were swimming. I smiled finally at my mother. "I'm ready to go back," I said. She looked at me and asked, "Do you like this room?" I nodded. "It is my favorite room," she said. "I used to play here when I was a child." "I think I would like to play here," I said. "In this room I learned that I was supposed to marry the pharaoh." I could see my mother on a throne beside Ptah-nem-hotep, and they were both wearing blue wigs. A boy with a different face from mine played between them. "If you had married him," I said, "I wouldn't be here." My mother's deep black eyes stared for a long while into my eyes. "You would still be my son," she said. Now she put me on her thigh, and I felt myself sink very slowly into the flesh of her lap. A tender settling that did not seem to stop even when her flesh gave way to no more. The reverberation of this delicious sensation went out like the last remembrance of evening, and now I lived with bliss to equal the desolation I had known while staring into the face of the dog. How I loved the red light of the pyramids as they reflected on the marsh green polish of the floor. "Yes, I was supposed to have married the pharaoh. Would you have liked him as a father? Is that why you began to cry?" I lied. "I do not know why the dog made me sad," I told her. "I think it is because you could have been a prince." "I do not think so. I was supposed to be the first wife of the pharaoh." "But you married my father instead." "Yes." "Why did you do that?" Nefertiti, as if aware of my power to visit, I never knew when, into the thoughts of others, now seemed to have no thoughts at all. "Yes, you married my father, and I am his son, and now I'm happy you took me into this room." I did not know really what I was saying, except that I knew that I had somehow been sly enough to say what would encourage her to tell me no more. "You are not your father's son," she said, and her eyes looked for an instant into her own terror. So she added, "That is, you are, but you are not." And I knew she had thought of Menenhedet. "It does not matter," she went on, "whose son you are, since I called for you. I prayed for you to come forth, and in truth I will never again be so splendid as I was in the hour when all that was inside me called for you." She held my face in her palms, and her hands were so alive that I felt as though I lay in between two lovely bodies. You came forth into my belief that I would give birth to a pharaoh, and that is a belief I have continued to have, even after I married your father. Do you still hold such a belief? I don't know. You have never been like other children. When I am alone with you, I do not feel a large difference in age between us. And when we are not together, I often think of what you say. Sometimes I believe thoughts come to you from other people's thoughts. Indeed, you see into the mind of others. You are most noble in such powers. Yet I do not think you will ever be a pharaoh. In my dreams, I do not see the double crown on you. What do you see for me? I had never been more sensitive to each wind that stirred in her mind. And so I saw again the black speck of the body of Laos that had frightened her, and I knew her fear. A worm might just as well have crawled over my own throat. That, however, was only one of the two houses of my mother. The blood of a warrior, like my great-grandfather, must have inhabited the other. Because when she looked at me again, her eyes were flat as an officer, measuring the value of a captive. Why did you begin to cry? She asked. Did the dog's eyes speak of a poor future? They spoke to me of shame, I said. And I thought of my mother and Menenhette in their embrace on the roof garden. I must have sent my thoughts to her, for the blood came to my mother's cheeks, and she was angry. Do not speak of shame, she said, after you have embarrassed me with the pharaoh. I felt a flare of the fury with which she had picked me up and taken me from the room. I do not think you will become a pharaoh, for the same reason the dog made you cry. You have the courage of a dog. We spoke often to each other in this manner, one cruelty to pay for another. I enjoyed such contests. I was better at them than Nefertiti. Oh, I said, I did not cry for lack of courage, but for simple misery that my father commands no respect. If, as you say, he is my father. She slapped my face. Furious tears rolled down my cheeks. They must have cut into her sight like a hard stone scratching a softer one. For the flat look in her eyes, dull as a black rock when she was angry, now cracked, and I saw the same sorrow in her that I had known when looking into the eyes of the dog. Something of the unspoken mystery of my mother's life was in her expression. Why, I asked.
Oh, there's that lighter.
Why, I asked, did you not become the first wife of the pharaoh? Again, she did not answer me. Instead, she said, I married your father because he was my half-brother. Oh yeah, I forgot. We learned that last time. And that was a useless reply, considering how a good number of royal marriages, if not to speak of half the marriages of the poor, were between brother and sister, or half-brother and half-sister. It was not an answer at all. But I was still able to see in my mother's mind how my father looked when he was young. And to my surprise, he was strong in face and even a little crude. Not crude, not yet young and smug and cruel in a way that many women might like. Today he was different. His face was pinched. The air that came into his nostrils was finer but meaner than when he was young, only 7 or 8 years ago. What? And I wondered if such a change was connected to the whispered hints with which I had lived for years, while present at many an angry silence between my mother, my father, and my great-grandfather. Some discomfort often passed between them, as if all were suffering the same indigestible meal. Afterward, coaxing my mother to tell me more, bullying her thoughts and pursuing them, I was finally informed of the family shame. The daughter of Menenhetit, my mother's own mother, Ast en Ra, had been married to a legitimate younger brother of Ramses III. But after this prince's death, and my mother's birth in the same month, Ast en Ra next married a very wealthy man who came from a peasant family in the worst quarter of Memphis. As a boy, he had worked as a cleaner of latrines. That was the shame. As he soon rose so high as to become a brothel keeper, for by his reputation in bed, he was near to the god Geb. Who's Geb? I don't remember that. So he was promoted due to his good bedroom etiquette. It's nice. And on these profits succeeded in making a fortune. My grandmother, Ast en Ra, had married him, I was told, to avenge herself on Menenhetit, who treated her as his mistress from the time she was 12, but ignored her when she married the prince. In retaliation, so my mother insisted, Ast en Ra chose the man whose success would offend my great-grandfather most. Menenhetit only spoke of this second husband as Fekfuti, F-E-K-H-F-U-T-I. It was our commonmost expression for shit collector, Fekfuti. And my mother giggled as she told me, oh, Menenhetit was so jealous. He hated to hear that his daughter had married the most fabulous lover in Memphis. That's why he detested your father from the day he was born. Did you? No, I liked him. He was my little brother, and I adored him. A memory leaped from her head most naturally into mine. And so I knew that she had seduced my father when he was 6 and she was 8. But as if aware again of this power in me to visit the thoughts of others, my mother now closed her mind. I could almost see it close, and for all I knew, had no further thoughts at all. I could almost see it close, and for all I knew, no further thoughts at all, certainly none I could pursue. Yet this clear picture I had of the naked child who would become my mother, holding the naked body of the child who was not yet my father, pressed against the memory of my mother and Menenhetit last night. And I knew for the first time why we speak of two houses of the mind. But such a thought was too large for my head, and I soon gave it up and felt a sweet relaxation, a nicety of pleasure in my limbs, as though something valuable had eluded me, but would yet come back. It was then I knew that I wanted to rest among these painted walls, where the breath of evening was forever the color of rose in expectant air. Shall we go back now? Asked my mother. You go, I told her. I would like to sleep in this room where you played when you were young. Events that never happened in my sight stirred about me, as if memories like birds from far away could light in your own nest. I thought of the wonder of Ayasiab's lips on sweet finger, and clouds of honeyed feelings rose from me again. All right, my mother said, I will leave you here, but you must not stray. I will be with the pharaoh and your great-grandfather in the place where you saw too much in the eye of the dog. She shivered at the recollection. So soon as you are tired of being alone, I want you to sit with us and give attention to what he says in his audiences. Many problems of government are considered here, she sighed. he listens to the most tedious difficulties and sometimes solves them. Although he is not, dear man, a practical heart. I noticed she spoke as if she was married to him on this day at least, and remembered her saying to my great-grandfather, "What if only one of us comes back with what we want?" Now she smiled at me as she went out, a dazzling smile to leave me full of the most generous warmth. And I was alone then, and comfortable, and lay on that couch whose ivory legs were like the limb and hoof of an ox, while the rose-colored lights of evening never moved through all of the afternoon. After a while, I was not asleep, but afloat in the place where one is so close to sleep that the two houses of the mind become like two boats that slip away from each other across the waters. I felt then how much of my existence might not be my own, but I still felt no woe. No sense, certainly, that I was in any way not a true child of 6. Yet, yes, I felt this with such confidence that I was happy and fell asleep. Or let me say, I ceased to know where I wandered. My ships drifted away from one another, and I lay there in the long, false evening of our painted room. That was a good one. I like that. I like all chapters with really bare minimum of incest. That's the only thing I hate about this book is it's gross as shit. When it was with the gods, it's like, all right, but now that it's like gotten into men and headed one's life, it's really grossing me out. So it's nice. What happened? So after his freak out with the dog, where he saw the dog's life, and the dog just kind of lived a dog life, kind of sad is what I got from that. He freaked out. He remembered he was dead, and for a 6-year-old to recall that they are actually 21 years old and dying or dead, in fact, and engaging in some pretty gross necrophiliac relations with their super dead grandpa, who I for a long time thought was not alive at the same time as him, but I was confused, obviously. What was I saying? He comes to grips with that and wakes up, and his mom has taken him to kind of a cool down room, kind of a playroom that has been painted as if a day is occurring near the pyramids. And they just kind of talk it through. It's nice. Nice chapter. And then she leaves, and he is chilling. No longer concerned with time travel or whatever, stuff like that.